Was there a particular event or time you recognized that filmmaking was not just a hobby, but that it would be your life and your living? I don't see how it can be a hobby. I mean, how can you afford to buy expensive cameras which last almost no time at all before there's technological upgrades, and the upgrade is even more expensive? So I've never considered it a hobby. I've always wanted to get into filmmaking, and the break actually came around the year 2000. I was designing websites at the time, and one of my clients was Gail Del Corral, the Del Corral Model and Talent Agency. And we actually became each other's clients because while I was doing their website, I was then on their books as acting talent. And the very first thing I did as a background extra was on a film directed by Nicolas Cage called Sonny. Went straight to the DVD market because it was criticized in pre-distribution screening as nobody outside New Orleans would understand the characters or the plot. But anyway, if you get hold of the DVD and you know where to look, as James Franco enters a cocktail party scene, you can see the corner of my forehead for 4 consecutive frames. And that's how I get started. As a background extra, if you behave yourself, you can get up close to the director and learn quite a lot by osmosis. Is it harder to get started or to keep going? Well, that's an incomplete question, because the third alternative is to finish a project. And there are actually 3 kinds of people: those who are good starters, those who are good finishers, and those who are very good at plodding along with a project in process. So the other question, what particular thing did you have to do to conquer, what particular thing did you have to conquer to do either? That is a very difficult question. I think I've always had a strong motivation to get into a project, get it started, follow all the way through, and then get it completed. And really the only thing I had to conquer, if anything, was looking at the budget for any project which is not greenlit and say, right, how can we make this happen? And inevitably it's other projects which actually create the income and then put the money in as an investment. What advice would you give to someone who wanted to have a career creating film? Well, first of all, quite simply, create a film. Use whatever camera you have, probably a phone camera, and do everything. Write a script, act in it, direct it, produce it. Get yourself some low-cost video editing software and do all the post-production yourself. In other words, create an indie film where you do everything. Now, why is that? Quite simply, that when you're in the industry, no matter what job you have, you'll understand the logistics of everyone else's job and you'll be a good team player. What was the most important lesson you had to learn that has had a positive effect on your film, and how did that lesson happen? I was with Stephen Rue. We were in the middle of all the devastation from Hurricane Katrina. There was devastation for 150 miles in all directions, no sign of life. And we were simply shooting stock footage of the devastation, camera on tripod, slow pan around. And then I said, right, okay, we've got what we need. Stephen said, no, keep filming. I said, what do you mean keep filming? We've got it all. He said, keep filming. And then in the distance was a small dot, the sound of an engine. The dot got larger, and it was recognizable as a FedEx truck. So I followed the FedEx truck as it came towards us, and then turned the camera to follow it, and followed it as it went off into the distance. Now, we haven't as yet contacted FedEx, but if they want to do a commercial along the lines that we deliver anywhere, no matter what, we certainly have the footage for that. And it brings to mind something that Alfred Hitchcock once said, which is that when you're doing a feature film, the director is God, but when you're filming a documentary, God is the director. And it totally makes sense. When you have a script, you really tend to be like a horse with blinkers. You don't see anything other than what you're looking for. But if you show up with an open mind, no preconceived ideas, you get the unexpected. You are a collaborator. How have you discovered members of your team, and how do you keep the relationship with them strong? Well, first of all, there's all kinds of places you can meet people, networking events, and in New Orleans especially, there's lots of parties going on all the time. And more recently, social media is becoming a great place to meet all kinds of people. So that's how you meet people. How do you get good relationships? And more importantly, how do you get a good team together for movie making? Now, we need a wide variety of talent, and if you put people in the right place, you've got a great team. If you put people in the wrong place, it's a little bit like asking a fish to ride a bicycle, and it's just going to look incompetent. So as long as everyone is doing what they love, that's a good start. And then, of course, it helps to praise everyone for what they're doing, and the results they're getting, and the contribution that they're making. So if everyone feels good, the end result is a happy family. And beyond the business of making the movie, people are individuals. If you take an interest in their personal lives, then you make friends. And when you make friends with people and you've had a great experience working with them, you're going to want to work with them again on future projects. You are here at the Louisiana Film Channel's Movie of the Week. You are here because of your work and how you do it. What are personal attributes that make for a good filmmaker, and what do you do to foster them? When I first look at a project, I decide whether to say yes or whether to walk away. How do I make that decision? If I can feel a passion for the project, if I can show up 100%, that's a yes. If I'm not really into it, that's a no. And why is this? Because I've discovered when I'm less than 100% into something, it's a struggle. But when I'm 100% committed, there's a new element that comes in, which I like to call spiritual power steering. It's a force greater than ourselves, whether it's the creator of the universe or whatever it is. It works like power steering on a car. It doesn't do things, but it makes the effort much less. And all kinds of things can happen during the course of a movie. One needs to be flexible enough to have a plan B when something doesn't quite work out, a plan C, run out of the letters of the alphabet and have a few more. So 100% commitment, flexibility, be open to the unexpected, and very often turn surprises into assets of production value. When I wanted to devote my life to making movies, my first decision was New York or Los Angeles. How does where you live influence how and what you make? And how do you think Louisiana currently affects your work and process? Well, when you have a studio with green screen, you can be anywhere in the world, apparently, no matter where your studio is. So where you appear to be depends very much on the script, the project that you're working on. With regard to Louisiana, or anywhere for that matter, it takes 6 months living in a particular place before you stop being a tourist. In other words, to fully get into the culture, food, music, And Louisiana has a certain magic about it. And one of the things that really brought it home to me personally was in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. So many people had evacuated to 40 other states and decided to make new homes there. But so many people decided to stay. And it was that commitment to rebuild no matter what, especially with the risks of more hurricanes and further devastation. But it was that feeling that Louisiana is home. And that made a deep impact on me. And I think that's the kind of thing that would be lost on other audiences around the world unless the spirit of New Orleans is completely conveyed through filmmaking. What makes a film great for you? Are there certain qualities that make a film better for you? I like to be in that hypnotic trance of forgetting that I'm watching a movie and actually becoming the main character. And I think we'd all agree with that anything that jars us out of that hypnotic trance really ruins the movie. When the movie goes beyond the story into an in-depth experience, when you feel that you've lived a lifetime through the main character, and when you feel that you've gone through some personal growth, some personal development as a result of being on that journey, to me that is much better than simply being entertained. What films have been the most inspiring or influential to you, and why? The first one that comes to mind is 2001: A Space Odyssey, where Stanley Kubrick took Arthur C. Clarke's short story, The Sentinel, and really grew it into an epic, beginning with the evolution of human consciousness from apes encountering the monolith, developing the beginnings of human consciousness, and then later the monolith shows up in the middle of the space program to transform a journey into space into what I can best describe as a mystical experience. And so the afterglow, if you like, or the aftertaste from watching the movie as I did when I was fairly young, was a sense of expansion, a sense of almost but not quite understanding the experience of watching the movie. And when you don't quite understand something, but there's something that you know intuitively without understanding, I think that's about as good as it gets. And the second one that comes to mind more recently is James Cameron's work in Avatar. What I especially admire about that is the way he used 3D to help to tell the story from somebody who is without the use of their legs to suddenly being able to have the opportunity to get into the avatar where they've got a whole new body that's bigger and stronger, and you have their point of view. The camera is raised to about 7 feet as they're running around and dancing and just enjoying that freedom of being able to move around. So I think this is the first time that 3D was used in a way that enhances the storytelling. Are there common qualities in cinema today that you dislike? Is there something you try to subvert, avoid, or rebel against in your work? If anything, I like, and this is what I like, not what I dislike, but I like to help people see how to think, not what to think. One of my pet peeves, in fact, is anything that tries to lead people to have a particular opinion or to feel a particular emotion. What I like to do is to create a context where people can make up their own mind and for that matter, make up their own heart. So if I create something that triggers a discussion with a wide range of insights and viewpoints and perspectives, then I feel that I've done something right. We are all here presumably partially because we love cinema. How did your love for movies get sparked? And what can we as a community do to help others discover a similar pleasure? Well, today, of course, we can simply turn on the television and switch to Netflix and browse around and find whatever we want to see. But long before that existed, we would plan on going to the theatre. We would look in the newspaper to see what we wanted to see. And there was that excitement and anticipation of looking forward to seeing the movie, long before we actually saw the movie itself. And then, of course, discussing it afterwards with people who we'd gone along to the theatre with and so on. What can we do today that is remotely similar to that? Well, my suggestion would be to set up Zoom conferences to discuss the movie, how each participant felt about what they'd seen, and generally discuss it on Zoom. And great use of social media to recreate online what was previously offline. Generally speaking, when we want to learn about a film, we talk to the director. But those that make films know how much they are really collaborations. What makes a fruitful collaboration? What do you do to enhance the collaborative process? I think the bottom line is everyone feeling that they're part of a happy family. Each individual respecting each other individual, respecting them not only as a person, but respecting their talents and skills, so that everyone supports everyone else in doing what they do best. It is said that there are only 6 stories, maybe 12. It's all been done before, and we've seen it all. What do you do to keep it fresh? Is there anything that you can do to subvert the process to keep it original? I think that's a trick question. As we've seen, whenever you follow the formula of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, you've got a much better chance of having a success at the box office. And anyone that deviates too far from that, it bombs. So the temptation to be original can be too big a risk. We get noticed because of our successes, but we create them on the back of our failures. We learn best from the experiences where it doesn't work, yet we still only discuss the success, not the failure. What failures of your own have you been able to learn from? How did they change you and your process? Well, the most memorable experience was not in a movie, but when I was filming a corporate training event, and due to constraints in a cramped physical space, I couldn't use a tripod. Basically, I had to hold a big heavy camera, Sony FS700, handheld shooting. And I thought to myself, right, this is heavy, I can probably manage it for 5 minutes. The presenter went on for well over 20 minutes, which felt like an eternity, and afterwards I needed a neck and shoulder massage and a long soak in a very hot bathtub to recover. Needless to say, from then on, before any event, I asked a lot more questions to make sure I knew exactly what I was getting into and made proper preparations. It all starts with the script. Maybe not. But when do you know a script is ready to shoot? What is your process of getting it there? Well, it all starts with a screenplay, which is completely different. And the screenplay is prepared in final draft software, and from the screenplay, the software will output everything you need for production. Sides for the actors for each scene, a list of locations, and so on and so forth. And when you've worked out all of those logistics and everything is in place, and ideally all the funding is in place as well, then you're ready to shoot. Several directors have told me that most of directing is actually casting. Regardless of whether that is true, some actors have it, and sometimes they need something to make it pop. You've spotted that it and captured it. What is it, and how do you find it? Well, first of all, acting is not acting. It's looking at a role and bringing that role to life in a unique way, which only you can with your own authentic personality. And a director recognizes the most appropriate actor for a particular role. And so we get back to casting. What does it take to bring that fully out? With a professional actor, that really isn't necessary because it's already happening. But if we're talking about a new actor who perhaps feels that they need to give a particular angle or spin or interpretation of a particular scene, then very often a brief interjection saying, "Why are you doing it that way? Just be yourself." And that's all it takes to get the message across, to get an absolutely perfect delivery. Is the film business fair? Why or why not? How do you make the apparatus work for you? I think it's important to start with the premise that it is fair, because on that basis, if something doesn't quite work out the way we expect, instead of falling into the victim mindset and thinking it's all unfair, we can say, okay, what is there to learn from this scenario, and how can we turn things around or go in a different direction, which leads to success? How do you make the apparatus work for you? Quite simply, networking. Meet lots of people, learn the business, meet investors, and if you are an investor, don't just invest in one movie. It's too big a risk. You need a portfolio of promising looking films, and all it takes is one box office success to handle 6 bombs. So that's risk mitigation. Is it the filmmaker's responsibility to find and develop your audience? Why do you feel that way? A big resounding yes. The relationship between filmmaker and audience is symbiotic. We need each other. And when I say we, I count myself both as a filmmaker and as the audience, albeit for different movies. If we don't listen to the audience as filmmakers, how can we ever possibly know what kind of films to make? What role have film festivals played in your life so far? Why are they necessary? How do you get the most out of them? The great thing about festivals is it's all about networking. It's about promoting your current film, getting into pre-production with future projects, getting on board with other people's projects, as well as building teams for your own projects. How do I get the most out of them? Quite frankly, I need to spend a lot more time at festivals than I have been. Although in 2006, the film Dear Mr. President was official selection in 12 film festivals. I'm a big believer in the importance of social media in many aspects of the film process. Are you on social media, and do you use it in your work? Why or why not? Absolutely, your number of followers are a very good guide to the size of your audience. Or maybe they're even one and the same. So if your promoting your work, putting together a movie trailer, first thing you're going to do is put it on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere where you're going to get the audience, and of course Twitter. Funny thing about Twitter is that, in my experience, all you have to do is put one simple tweet, 140 characters or less, and you get an instant response. I've actually had people phone me up simply because I sent them a private tweet, and for some reason they thought it was important and it demanded immediate response, despite the fact that usually they're very difficult to get hold of. So never underestimate 140 characters. When I got started, there were two screens, the movie screen and the television screen. Now there are also computers, tablets and phones. Screens are everywhere: the home, the bus stop, the elevator, the taxi cab. As a creator, how does this affect the stories you tell and how you tell them? Well, let's go back very briefly to the early days of television, where the screens were small. Very often they were black and white, not color, and the audio quality was very poor with a complete lack of bass. So the way the story would be told is pretty much the same as cinema, big screen, except production music would take into account the fact that a lot of people wouldn't hear any bass. Because the screens were small, there were a lot of close-ups, and makeup was very heavy, exaggerated contrast. And now, of course, that is no longer the case. Home theaters, cinemas, pretty much the same kind of environment. Big screen, high definition, full sound, complete with heavy bass, and so on. So you get the full experience. Now, in contrast, when you're looking at an advertising display at a bus stop or taxi or wherever, it's a noisy environment. You have to capture the attention of your audience, and you're only going to sustain that attention for a few seconds. So you really have to be able to tell a story in such a way that it will work without any audio. And the best way to do that is to have a story where it's told visually, it's all in the facial expressions, a lot of emotion can be conveyed that way. And the other point is that you only have a short space of time to tell the story. So, of course, you've got to capture somebody's attention, sustain it, and then ideally, of course, you have a call to action. So, in terms of timing, this has actually been studied with people working in offices where they're getting a marketing email containing a video. Now, picture what's going on. They are multitasking. Somebody is walking in, distracting them by putting something in their in tray while they're on the phone to one person, looking at an email regarding something totally different. Complete multitasking. And then up comes an email with your video. Now, in that environment, you have 4 seconds to get their attention, a maximum of 27 seconds to sustain it. And in that 27 seconds, you need the call to action, which needs to be something very simple. In other words, either a phone number they can make a quick note of, or a link they can click to put in their name and email address. You get the idea, and they've got to be able to do it fast. Otherwise, they will say, I can't do this now, I'll leave it until later. And guess what? Later never comes. If there is one thing or more you think would make the film industry better, what would it be? In my opinion, a new social media platform that is completely tailor-made for taking raw talent, guiding each individual into the training they need, combining that with a marketplace for reviewing new camera equipment and so on that comes onto the scene, and of course an ongoing film festival. So in other words, anything and everything related to the film industry all together online in one place. Now we've seen prototypes of this to a certain extent with Facebook groups, LinkedIn, Zoom conferences, Adobe training. The problem with these other areas is that the platform itself, Facebook for example, is notorious for clickbait, and it's all about selling advertising. And then of course you have advertisers who are placing their ads in places that they may or may not get results. So it's all pretty much a noisy distraction. Now by having a completely new platform where everything is oriented with purposefulness in each moment, this would be financed through a subscription basis for all members. And members are people in the film industry who are serious about their career getting on. So they're making an investment in this subscription in order to get the leverage to meet people, get the training, get the experience, and of course get into gigs. The other point, of course, is that when it comes to new productions, the first thing you do is remember people you've worked with in the past, and those are the people that you want on your team. That makes it very difficult for new talent to even get started without any experience at all. So the new online social media platform would help new talent to position themselves to get past that initial hurdle. Do filmmakers have any responsibility to culture? Do you feel that being a creative person requires that you give back or tell a particular story? Why or why not? Let's look at the why not part first of all, and that is, if you feel some sort of irrational guilt and an obligation to tell a particular story, you're going to start concocting it. It's going to be hard work writing, and the end result is going to have no value whatsoever. It just won't feel right. On the other hand, a powerful story has a life force of its own. It's an unstoppable flow of inspiration. And the story will, first of all, find its way into the mind of, let's say, the right writers. And that story will then come to life in a flow of words initially. And the screenplay is the starting point of the movie. And likewise, just as the right writer came along, so the right producer, director, and actors will come along. And for each role, the actor will feel so empowered by the role that it almost feels like they have totally become that person, at least throughout the production of the film. So it's really a yes and no answer. The only responsibility that any individual has is to be true to themselves, honest about how they feel, and be in alignment with their own authentic flow of inspiration.
Dear Mr. President,
what inspired this film, and where did you find your cast? I was sitting in Piccadilly's cafeteria having lunch with Stephen Roux, and he came up with something in a publication somewhere about a contest to produce a short film, which had to be 6 minutes. And we thought, well, is there anything amongst all the footage that we've shot that we could actually put together and create a short film? And we looked at what we had, we reviewed it in our mind. I mean, sitting at a table discussing 400 hours of footage that are not there in front of you, and neither of us could come up with a story. But then there was this 12-year-old African-American girl and her grandmother who came in, and we noticed them sitting at a table across the cafeteria. And we thought, this is amazing. I mean, this is a girl smartly dressed in a white outfit, surrounded by people who were in jeans and looking very grubby because everyone was mainly involved in cleaning up part of the devastation, notably their own homes. So here was somebody looking totally immaculate in contrast to that environment. And I looked at Stephen, he looked at me. I think we both came up with the idea at the same time of having her somehow as the star of a short story. And we went over, we introduced ourselves, and at that moment we had no idea what we were going to do. The only thing we were clear about was that we wanted to work with her in some capacity if it was at all possible. And her grandmother was in agreement, and we just asked her a few questions. Turns out that she was in her school uniform, and she liked to ride around on a bicycle. And so we decided we would feature the bicycle. We could actually shoot some scenes on green screen. It's very surreal. I came up with the idea that what if she's no longer alive? What if she's a ghost? There's even one scene where she's apparently semi-transparent. It's a powerful tearjerker. And in this movie, actually, apart from helping to raise over $10,000 for American Red Cross and Habitat for Humanity, it was also later on official selection in 12 film festivals in 2006. What is your next project? Well, after I finish completing this interview, editing and uploading it, I will then return to something I was in the middle of before starting this, and that is post-production on a wedding video. The wedding took place in Lahore, Pakistan last December, and very colourful, coming together very nicely. Coming up a little bit later on in 2021, I'll be flying out to India to film some corporate training, and also at the same time a documentary film, which I'm actually spearheading myself. It's called The Carney Card. And the Carney Card is a medical data system that actually operates with two encrypted keys, one provided by the patient, the other either by a doctor or a nurse or a paramedic or hospital receptionist. So it's a very high secure system, but at the same time, everyone can get the data they need exactly when they need it without delay in order to maximize quality of patient care without any error. So that's coming up there. And also, something I'm very interested in getting involved in, Scarlett Johansson has approached the British healer Matthew Manning with the intention to film a documentary based on his life. And I first met Matthew Manning many years ago, and we really connected. We certainly have a lot in common. And so I'm very interested in getting involved in that one. Any unique issues encountered, and if so, your creative solution? During production of Dear Mr. President, Kalyn had two roles to perform, one visually, without any dialogue, and secondly, voiceover. And the voiceover was where we got some difficulties. For example, when she was saying the title of the film, Dear Mr. President, what she actually said was, Dear Mr. President. And I looked at Stephen and I let him get on with a little bit of directing there. So he basically just said, can we try that again? Dear Mr. President. And she went, Dear Mr. President. In the end, Stephen gave up. I took over and I said, can you say dent? And she said, dent. Okay, that's great. Now, can you say, Dear Mr. President? And she went, Dear Mr. President, dent. At that point, I thought, you know what? I can work with that. I can edit it in post. We've got what we need. So that was simple enough. Anyone you would like to acknowledge or thank from this project? Dear Mr. President. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who agreed to be interviewed with two guys and a camera, namely Stephen Root and myself. There they were in the middle of all the devastation.
And we were just all in pieces, and then we had to pack up and leave that morning, and we just didn't know what we were doing.
And suddenly we showed up, and they actually agreed to take time out and appear on camera.
We had to carry dead bodies down the interstate for them to be able to get on the helicopters that were picking us up to bring us to who knows where.
Huge emotional shift from one thing to another for that. So I'd really like to acknowledge their participation. And also, of course, all of the various politicians that we managed to make appointments for to get on camera as well. I'd also like to thank Susie Labrie for bringing this film to the attention of the Louisiana Film Channel, and Dr. Lucas Fry, who I have never met, never spoken to, but read all about on the Film Channel website. And what I get is that Dr. Lucas Fry is a visionary. He has his heart in Louisiana. He believes that everyone in the film industry deserves to have a break and get paid and have a successful career. And I thoroughly endorse that. And so on behalf of everyone who's going to benefit from that, I'd like to say a big, warm, hearty thank you. What do you look for in a script? The first thing I look for is impossibility to put the script down until I've finished reading it all the way through. I look for a strong human interest story, strong protagonist, authentic dialogue, little things that make me laugh unexpectedly, and, in short, a package that will later enable a number of talented people to stand up and say, "I'd like to thank the Academy." How do you select a director? I select a director pretty much the same way I select spices in cooking. I want to enhance the flavor of food, not upstage it or alter it in some way. And likewise with a director, what I actually do is I look for a similar movie in a similar genre to the project that's in development. And if I get hooked into that hypnotic trance all the way through, if I get the kind of audience experience that I'm looking for, then I read through the rolling credits at the end, find the director, make contact, and invite them to participate. What checks and balances do you make when managing budgets? I start out with the assumption that everything is going to cost a lot more than originally anticipated, especially when you take into account the fact that it's all going to cost a lot more than originally anticipated. What I like to do is take a very pessimistic view of everything, overestimate expenses, and underestimate the production value of everything, so that everything becomes very frugal, and the result is that at the end of the day, of course, reality is never as bad as that pessimistic view. So we come out ahead of budget and with very high production value of everything that's happening. Have you ever had to handle a difficult conflict in your career? Yes, absolutely, all the time. I love difficult conflicts, and the reason is it's a very good starting point for any discussion, because the bottom line is everyone's looking for the win-win, and if your starting point is as far removed from that as can be imagined, then by the time you've actually met in that agreement, everyone has a great sense of achievement, and it's a very bonding experience to transform conflict into harmony, and you can make friends for life that way. What would you change in a movie you produced that you believe would make it better? That's the question I ask myself in every moment of post-production. I'm continuously looking to enhance what there is. In fact, I do all of the editing in an altered state of consciousness. And what I'm ultimately aiming for is not merely to keep the audience in the familiar hypnotic trance where you become the main character and everything is happening to you. I want to take the audience beyond that hypnotic trance into the meditation state, and instead of having a temporary suspension of disbelief, to have a permanent, life-changing experience. What I would like to see is people at the end of a movie, instead of simply leaving the theatre with the people they came along with, to make eye contact with complete strangers and feel a connection and strike up new conversations, make new friends. A stranger is a friend we have never met, to actually take that statement and make it true. To me, that would be the ultimate in a movie experience.